we and the UN are obviously disappointed that at the time when we were trying to have a more comprehensive way of engaging with the authorities in Myanmar, that this is happening. But the lesson we are drawing from this is to be even more determined that the goals that we all share in the international community, which is democracy, more human rights, and more all-inclusive national reconciliation process, is in fact pursued with greater vigor.
But some of Burma's Asian neighbours seem to believe that quiet diplomacy works better than what the critics would call megaphone diplomacy. Where do you stand on that?
Well, we as the UN, the good office role of the Secretary General is in fact on the authorized by the General Assembly, is on the quiet diplomacy side. But at the same time, it's important that the authorities in Myanmar recognize the concerns of the international community, however expressed, and then work with the neighboring countries and the Secretary General so that we set things back in the right direction.
Can we expect an initiative from you? People are asking, when are you going out next?
Well, I have a standing invitation from the authority to visit. As you know, I've been there twice before, and I've been privileged to see both Aung San Suu Kyi and the leadership of the country. I intend to go back, and the exact dates are being worked out with the authorities, because it's important to be able to convey directly to the leadership of the country the legitimate concerns of the international community, and to offer to work with them in a constructive manner. But then, of course, they also have to work with us to deliver concrete results, because the good official role of the Secretary General is not an end by itself, it's a means to produce results in the areas of greater democracy, human rights, but also on key developmental issues.
The government has announced that the National Convention has just finished drawing up guidelines for a new constitution that's said to be the first stage in what's called a roadmap to democracy. Are they on the right track?
Well, we've said the Secretary General was clear that he will prefer and will have recommended to the authorities a much more inclusive process, more transparent process, where the voices of all the important segments of the country will be heard, will have been preferred. But nonetheless, we now have the conclusion of this National Convention. The next step is to open up the discussions so that when the final constitution is arrived at, it will reflect the wish of the people of Myanmar, since in any case this document is going to be subjected, I understand, to a referendum. Is preferable, isn't it, to now have extensive consultations with those who did not participate or were not allowed to participate in the recently concluded National Convention.
Do you have any hope at all that Aung San Suu Kyi will ever be able to take part?
We certainly hope so. She represents a force in the country. She represents constituency in the country. She is willing to, I have spoken with her twice, she is willing to make the necessary sacrifices, necessary but principled compromise to be able to play a role that will address the needs of the ethnic minorities, the ceasefire groups, and of course our own political party. I think we believe at the UN she has an important role to play, and it will be to the benefit of the people of Myanmar and the future stability of the country if she were allowed to have a role in the process.
Well, that's Ibrahim Gambari, the UN envoy to Burma. Zoya has stayed with us to hear that. Zoya, your response to what seems to be the UN's approach, quiet diplomacy?
Right. We do welcome the UN Special Envoy to Burma, and it is a significant role of the UN to take for the Burmese people. But what we want is a much more proactive approach by the UN. Just not wait-and-see policy, but make sure to prevent people in Burma not to become another 1988 uprising again. And we want the UN Special Envoy to visit Burma again and then talk to not only the generals and also not only the NLD but also ethnic nationalities in different parts of the country, and visit the area where affected by the regime's policy of ethnic cleansing, genocide, targeting civilians in the conflict area, and to raise this urgently, immediately in the UN Security Council to have a comprehensive agenda with a specific time frame.
Okay, Zoya.
Action, Burma.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. Those are the views coming loud and clear then. I'm joined on the line now by the British Labour MP, Anne McEachin. Anne, I think you've been out to Burma. You've seen a lot of the troubles for yourself.
Well, I was out at the Thai border, just to clarify that, with the International Development Select Committee when we visited there in May. And as you may be aware, the Select Committee produced its own report just towards the end of July, calling on much increased funding for work both within Burma itself, but also for the refugee community who are located in the various border regions. Right, very much
a humanitarian cry of help there,
Absolutely,
isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Let me just put this to you. Gordon Brown, the British Prime Minister, of course, and leader of your party, he has also been speaking in the last few days about Burma and seems to be putting out the message, from what I can read very clearly, that China and Burma's neighbours really have got to grasp the nettle on this. Is that fair?
I think it's absolutely key, not only China, but also India and Russia. And I think the UK government has always had a strong relationship with the Indian authorities in particular. And I think that's one area where we have a special degree of influence. But also at the UN, there is a need for the two permanent five members, China and Russia, to step up the pressure. Now, I hear what the UN Special Envoy has had to say, and I think quiet diplomacy has an important part to play. But it's also important that the real tragedy that is going on in this country at this very minute is brought to international attention, so much more considerable pressure can be brought on the Burmese authorities.
Is it not reasonable then, if you think that clearly the importance of China is, and you mentioned Russia, you mentioned India, paramount, and we've seen some of the ways in which those countries have worked with and around Burma, that they should be taking the lead nonetheless, that it's not really beneficial to have the likes of the EU and the US trying to run the show?
I think it's important, as far as we can, to try and bring these major players and neighbouring countries on board, because not only are they actually vital in terms of economic investment into Burma currently, they also are the people who are seeing the many thousands of refugees beginning to start to flow towards their own borders. And if Burma starts to collapse, of which there are many signs that this could well happen, in its infrastructure in terms of the literally famine that is going on and widespread poverty, then the effects on their own nations will be very considerable. So I think it's actually putting pressure on them in turn to put pressure on the Burmese authorities to make the current so-called process in the constitution actually become one that really is transparent and will have some credibility. At the moment, I have very little doubt that it doesn't have credibility.
Right, yeah. Anne McEachin, thanks very much indeed for that. A couple more emails here from you. This is one from Burma, anonymous as it happens. The only resolution on Burma brought to the United Nations Security Council was vetoed on grounds that the situation was not a threat to the international community. Must there be an Asian Darfur or Rwanda before any action is taken? And another one, this from Tez Anderson in Derby here in the UK. The members of ASEAN, of which of course Burma is a member, constantly fail to put more pressure on Burma to toe the line. ASEAN calls this not interfering with a member state. Well, until they agree to do this, sanctions, etc. from the rest of the world will be meaningless. Dr. Zarni, you've been listening very patiently to a lot of the calls that are flooding in. Sanctions or no sanctions, I mean, for you've been on a road to Damascus in a way on this. You've changed your view, haven't you?
That's right, yeah. I worked on the sanction campaign as the founder of an activist organization that led the sanctions and consumer boycotts for over a decade, yeah. And we succeeded in getting, close to 100 Western investors out of the country. We succeeded in lobbying the U.S. Congress and the White House to take very tough stand. But what we failed to do when we were formulating this road towards greater sanctions and greater pressure was the rise of China and the rise of India. We failed to anticipate the rise of two giant neighbors of our country, and we looked at the wrong model, which was South Africa's anti-apartheid struggle.
Right, yeah.
And so now, after, say, like 12 years of working on supporting Daw Aung San Suu Kyi and the opposition inside using consumer boycotts and greater pressure campaigns, we realized that we have, in effect, made the problem worse. You know, the nature of the problem is not just human rights. Human rights issues, oppression, rape, ethnic persecution of ethnic minorities in conflict zone, these are not the root of the Burma's troubles, but they are the byproducts of Burmese problems since, you know, we gained independence from Britain in 1948. And the root, there are twin evils of Burma, which is one, political conflict between the Burmese army and the autonomy-minded minorities, which Zoya is a part of. You know, her father is the head of the Korean National Organization. And then another one is the conflict between the military, its vision, and the vision of civilian politicians and civilians. Right. And that the other